For the first 4 decades of my life, I was basically sick. Like there were so many different things that I went to doctors for during my life that carnivore basically resolved. I'm sure the depression and the IBS go back earlier than my first memories. Most of the medications that I was prescribed, I didn't react well to. In my 20s and 30s, I was prescribed statins and pressure medication and all kinds of things. So I did Lion Diet for 90 days, which was the healthiest experience of my life. I changed so rapidly during that time. I ate all the garbage and I loved it. And I couldn't control myself. I fired almost all my doctors, everyone except my dentist and my oral surgeon. I fired them all.
Okay, Jason, it's good to have you here today. Welcome. Thanks for doing this. Would you mind sharing what part of the world are you in, if you don't mind sharing that?
I'm in Brooklyn, New York.
Okay. All right. I guess you've got a bit of a success story to share with us. So I guess this maybe to start with some background information and we'll just take it from there.
Yes, for the first 4 decades of my life, I was basically sick. The two biggest problems I had were depression and IBS. And even from my earliest memories, like my 5th birthday party or, kindergarten, I was always suffering from food addiction, binge eating, sugar addiction, and it wasn't diagnosed back then as irritable bowel syndrome, but I was basically having the same symptoms then as I was later on as an adult when I was diagnosed with that. And so for decades, I was suffering not just from those things, but all kinds of rosacea, dandruff, joint and muscle pain, acid reflux, foot fungus. There were so many different things that I went to doctors for during my life that carnivore basically resolved.
Okay. So you said 4 days. How old are you now?
44.
44. And do you feel like the symptoms you had, like the depression and some of these other issues, came after the gut issues? You might have been too young to remember, but do you remember if the gut issues preceded some of these other things, or were they simultaneous? Or
I guess they were simultaneous as far as I could tell. My memories don't go far back enough I'm sure the depression and the IBS go back earlier than my first memories.
Oh, well, okay. So quite a while. And so when you were raised on just a kind of standard cereal, breakfast, whatever most kids were, I know when I was a kid, it was the same stuff. It was eating Lucky Charms and Cocoa Puffs, and I don't remember all the junk I used to eat. But so that was pretty much your diet, I assume?
Yeah, cereal with skim milk every morning, all kinds of processed garbage that comes in packages during the day, ice cream after dinner. My parents always tried to eat healthy meals, what they thought was healthy, which was like vegetables. And, I remember the thing they loved to make was tabbouleh, which is like vegetables cut into tiny little pieces, and it's like a salad. And I never really liked it. Fat, high carb, high fiber. That was how I was raised.
Yeah, it's kind of a Mediterranean or Middle Eastern dish. I never liked that stuff either. I never liked vegetables either. I was just one of those guys that just never enjoyed them. You got all these different various medical issues. You've got IBS, you've got depression, you've got rosacea, you've got joint pain, so on and so forth. How was that treated over the years? Did doctors here take this medicine, take these pills? What was the treatment?
Yes, for any issue that I went to the doctor for, I would get pills or creams or whatever. They tried all kinds of stuff on me, and basically occasionally something works, but the overall, I would say it made me worse rather than better. And most of the medications that I was prescribed, I didn't react well to. And they were just going to the doctor. In my 20s and 30s, I was prescribed statins and pressure medication and all kinds of things. And basically, the majority of what I was prescribed, I couldn't take it for more than a certain number of days or a couple of weeks. The side effects, I would just throw them out.
How often did the doctors discuss nutrition with you? Was that something that was brought up occasionally or ever?
I remember when I went to the dermatologist as a teenager for acne and rosacea, the doctor said, don't eat chips. The oil in the chips will make your acne worse. I can't remember any much more than that as far as nutrition goes. Actually, I saw a gastroenterologist a few times, and they would always say, eat more fiber. But besides those two things,
Okay.
no, they really didn't talk about nutrition.
Okay, don't eat chips, eat more fiber. That's fairly typical advice, I would say, particularly around that regarding fiber. And the gastroenterologists really, for some reason, believe that the fiber is sort of the panacea for a lot of things. When a lot of people actually messes up, it seems. At least that's been my observation. So it's safe to say no one ever suggested you to go on a low carb or certainly a carnivore diet throughout those years. I would be willing to bet that never happened, correct?
No, I was always told eat less red meat, eat more vegetables, and nobody mentioned low carb, and nobody said that, animal fat is healthy. And I basically, so I'm pretty, the whole thing, I was given the wrong advice my whole life, basically. That's what I've come to understand. And it took many years to come to that understanding before I was even willing to get close to trying carnivore. In the 2000s, I heard about Atkins, which is low. Sorry.
I was going to say, so how did you, of your own accord, come to the realization that you had to change your diet?
I always knew that eating healthy would be healthy. I don't know how I came to that idea, but I always knew it. I just didn't know what healthy was. And then in like the 2000s or so, I heard about Atkins and I saw some people lost weight on it. And that is basically low carb, ketogenic. And I didn't really try it back then. I was more trying calorie restriction, eating only certain times of the day. That was what I was trying to do back then. But my food addiction, my binge eating, that couldn't work because of my food addiction and binge eating and sugar addiction, because I could wait a while before I eat, and that hunger would just drive me crazy and then put me into a state where I'm going to binge. So then in the 2010s, I heard about ketogenic diet, but it flew in the face of everything that I had learned my whole life: low fat, high fiber, ketogenic, just more animal fat, more animal protein. Sounded wrong, but I kept encountering it during the 2010s, and it just put the idea in my mind. And then I think it was maybe 2017 or so when I saw you on Joe Rogan, and what you were saying was really interesting, but at the same time, I thought it was insane at the time. So I wasn't ready to receive the message at that time. And then, not sure when, maybe about 2019 or 2020 or so, I saw Michaela Peterson's band TED Talk, and then some other thing where she described her story. And it resonated with me because, I didn't really take any psychological medications for the depression, but if she was able to get off of psychological medications for depression, then maybe eating more animal fat, animal protein might help me do that. Or it might help me just not have depression or relieve it somehow. I never could have expected that it would help with the IBS and just like every reason I ever went to a doctor in my life, like all those problems just basically went away, but 95%, let's say. So the amount of relief is dramatic. 2019, I saw Michaela Pearson, I think it was, maybe 2020. But in March of 2020, I decided I'm going to do keto. And for a whole year, I was doing keto on and off. The issue was the fact that I'm having stuff besides meat caused me to have cravings for other things. And so that's why I say I was on and off with keto. I just couldn't maintain it because I would get cravings. And then in March of 2021 was when I decided I'm going to try carnivore. And so I did Lion Diet for 90 days, which was the healthiest experience of my life. It changed. I changed so rapidly during that time. I lost a lot of weight, and just basically every medical condition that ever bothered me was 95% gone. I thought it was 100% gone at the time, but now a lot of time has passed. I've tried all kinds of food experiments, and I know none of it's gone. If I have the wrong thing, IBS will come back within hours. Yeah, so that's how I came to understand that. I took my understanding that what you eat matters to actually knowing what I should be eating, which is basically carnivore.
Okay. And so let me go back to the food addiction stuff, because that becomes a more and more recurring theme. Binging, how did that impact you? How would you could you describe a little bit about what you were up to at that time when you were suffering from these things?
So when I was a young kid, like one of my first memories is my 5th birthday party, and there was a big bowl of M&Ms, and I'm not sure if it was the first time I had M&Ms or not, but I almost ate the entire bowl of M&Ms, and I had extreme stomach distress for I don't know how long. It was terrible, and it's one of my first memories. IBS or food addiction, binge eating, sugar addiction in particular. But as I was going through my childhood, my teens, I was always eating sugary processed foods, Snickers and Pop Tarts, and just the whole gamut, everything, all the bad stuff. I ate all the garbage, and I loved it, and I couldn't control myself.
Yeah. Okay. And Snickers they're so satisfying though, right? That's what the marketing is. So so recently, scientific paper case series came out on depression, and it showed that the patients that went on a animal-based ketogenic diet, essentially a carnivore diet, resolved their depression, 2 of them in 7 weeks and 1 of them in 12 weeks. What was your experience with that? How long did it take for you to get resolution?
So during the year that I was doing keto, there was no resolution. When I decided I'm going to try Lion Diet I thought I was going to do it for 30 days, but I did it for 90 days. And during that, I would say it was probably by day 3 that I realized something is different, something is better. And within about 2 weeks or so, I'd say the depression, anxiety, also OCD was like 90% resolved by 2 weeks.
Wow. Interesting. Obviously, my guess is when you saw me on Rogan back in 2017, this guy's a nut, right? This is too crazy. Seen several confirmatory videos from other people talking about this. When you went in, were you somewhat skeptical, or were you somewhat surprised by how it happened to you? Or what was your impression once you started doing this for a couple of weeks?
No, I wasn't surprised because when I saw you in 2017, it put the idea in my head. I started being more aware of ketogenic diet and just paying attention to it whenever I saw it come up in news or whatever. And so I started to get the indoctrination out of my head that animal fat is bad for you. And so by the time I was willing to try it in 2020, I basically had already come to terms with animal fat's not going to kill me. or at least if as long as I don't combine it with sugar and seed oils, it won't kill me. And by the time 2021, when I was ready for carnivore, I already knew that it wasn't dangerous, or at least I suspected it super strongly that it wasn't dangerous and it was worth a try.
Okay, fair enough. And you'd seen several doctors over the years. Was there any weight loss that occurred during going carnivore? Did you lose any weight?
Yeah. So during the year of keto, I lost about 20 pounds. And then in the 90 days of Lion Diet, I lost 45 pounds. And then another like 30, 35 pounds over the next couple years of carnivore.
So that's quite a bit. So you're getting close to 100 pounds of weight loss or something along those
it's like
lines.
95, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's quite a bit. So obviously people have noticed, I would imagine, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever gone back to any of the physicians I don't know if you had a primary care physician or anything like that, or did you have anybody that's been managing you long term?
I fired almost all my doctors, everyone except my dentist and my oral surgeon. I fired them all. Because except for a couple of times that I can recall, they were making me sicker, not healthier.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, if you're not getting the results you want, you shouldn't proceed with that. And I think that's fair enough. Your dentist, it's interesting because what we eat affects our teeth significantly. When people eat a lot of sugar, they get a lot of cavities for whatever reason. So has your dentist commented on changing oral health since you've switched to a diet that excludes processed foods and sugars and now just primarily meat?
I haven't gone for the regular checkups and cleanings like I used to. And the only time I've been there was for repair a crown, things like that. They didn't really have the opportunity to give me the normal speech that they would.
Okay. All right. Do you feel, I know in my personal situation, I always had, my teeth were okay, but I always had, Dennis was saying, your gums are starting to recede. We might have to do some kind of gum transplantation because I had gingivitis and things of those natures, but that's all gone for me. It just went away. I don't have any issues with my teeth anymore. Is there anything you relate similar to that or no?
In the 2010s, every time I went or every other time, they were saying we're getting more and more serious with periodontitis, and soon we're going to actually need to do something. And I was heavily resisting it for years. But at the time, I also had discomfort in my gums. I'd have bleeding gums, and after I went carnivore, all that discomfort went away.
Mm-hmm.
And my gums stopped bleeding. Like when I brush my teeth or floss, I used to bleed, but now I don't.
Yeah, so the opposite of scurvy, right? So we hear people are getting scurvy on carnivore, and actually the gums get healthier in many cases. You'd mentioned, I think I heard you say something about foot fungus, maybe athlete's foot or some toenail fungus or something. Did that also improve with the diet or no?
Yeah, I had discolored toenails, not on all my toes, but just 3 of them on one foot and 2 of them on the other. And tried all kinds of creams and sprays, and nothing ever really helped. But carnivore, by the end of the 90 days, I don't remember when it happened, but at least by the end of the 90 days of Lion Diet, my feet were perfect. Also, on the bottom of my feet, there was skin was always peeling in circular formations, and that went away as well.
That's good. That's good. And talk to me about because this is a big issue. And I think when you're treating chronic disease of really almost any nature, you're really treating poor nutrition, and you understand that poor nutrition often comes with binging or addictive natures. I think a lot of people really struggle with these foods and being addicted to them. How has this diet impacted your desire to eat processed garbage, sugary foods like you had before? How did it make a difference to you?
Yes, before carnivore, before keto, I had cravings every day. I have probably had a couple cravings in the morning, and then multiple cravings in the afternoon, and then the worst ones at night. And I couldn't control myself. But during carnivore, I wouldn't say cravings have 100% gone away. If I see ice cream or I see pizza, I may get those cravings later in the day for it. I'll eat a big fatty steak, and that'll, hold me off many hours until and let me sleep without waking up with cravings. So I would say my solution to when a craving does pop up, which it's rare that cravings pop up now, but when I get cravings, I will just binge on meat, and then it solves the problem. I won't let myself have enough space to eat something bad.
Okay, good strategy there. What you said keto for a while, maybe some benefits, not the full benefits you got on Carnivore. How was your keto? How did you do your ketogenic diet? Just out of curiosity, what was a ketogenic? What did the ketogenic diet look like for you?
For me, it meant eliminating the ultra processed foods. It was a lot of cooked vegetables with like ground beef or salmon or pretty much any protein and animal fat with some veggies. Try not to do fruit, not to do bread or anything, nothing with too many carbs.
Okay, so not a lot of like fat bombs and keto desserts and stuff like that, what so many people often do.
No, I already was skeptical of the keto products. I felt like the commercialization of those products ensures that they're not keto.
Yeah, or not healthy at least. You can certainly say that. But yeah, a lot of people. So basically, vegetables and animal products, basically. And so, were you surprised that removing the vegetables actually had an additional benefit? Because a lot of people will say, they'll tell me all the time, "Hey, you do just as good with vegetables." And one, I don't like them, but two, I don't. For me, it doesn't work that way either. So, were you surprised about that?
I guess so. Yeah. After an entire lifetime of thinking you need to eat your veggies, you need to have a balanced diet, you need to eat the rainbow, it was hard to change my thinking. But all it takes is a small personal experiment, which is not that hard to do, and you find out exactly how you react to foods.
Yeah, it's interesting. You've got like Hulk Hogan. Hey kids, eat your vitamins, say your prayers, and eat your vegetables. I mean, this has been ingrained into us since we were born, and probably many generations. I've heard that as a kid. I had to eat my vegetables, and even though I'd never liked them, I don't know why. But it's interesting to see that. So, do you mind sharing what you do for a living? Is that something you'd be mind sharing?
Yeah, so I work at coin mining hosting company. So clients or regular people or institutions who want to do Bitcoin mining or other crypto mining, they're able to use a company like ours to host their miners. So they don't have to deal with it themselves. They don't have to know anything, basically. They just invest in the machines. We take care of the machines, keep them running, and the Bitcoin or other coins shows up in the associated wallets. And it's a nice way to make money that doesn't require that much work. Just we do all the work for the customer. The other thing that I do there is I supply other hosting companies with the infrastructure needed to do hosting or self-mining.
So this obviously you haven't been doing this your whole life. Bitcoin's only been around for what was it, 2013, I think, when correct me, it might be 2012, 2013.
2008, I think, is when it started, but
okay.
I think I first heard about it in about 2012 or 13 or something like that.
I see. Okay. And so the people that you work with, have they noticed a big change in obviously they had to have noticed a 100-pound weight loss?
I was already carnivore for a couple of years before I started working at this company, so they didn't notice the change. But at this company, there are a couple of people who are also doing carnivore. So it has been interesting to see that.
Yeah, it has been interesting to see somewhat of a convergence in people that do Bitcoin and also become carnivore. There's quite a few. And I don't know if I spoke, well, I was there at the Bitcoin conference that they had in Nashville this year, the kind of the big event for the year, I think. And I was supposed to speak, but Trump bumped me. Unfortunately, they're more interested in him than me, which I think that's funny. They asked me to speak again next year in Las Vegas. So I'll go down there and share some stuff about nutrition. So
well, I was at that show and I saw you there at the cattle feast afterwards.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Like I said, they changed at the last minute to speaking. I was supposed to speak on Saturday morning, and I'd already bought tickets and made all kinds of arrangements for the family. And I said, "Can you come Friday?" I said, "No, I just can't do it. I can't do it that on that." That was like the day before. I said, "I can't change it." So maybe we'll get to talk next year. Yeah, like I said, there are a lot of people that do Bitcoin that are interested in carnivore. Obviously, people talk about just distrust in institutions in many ways, whether it's the Fed or the USDA or, gosh, the IRS or who knows. There's so many things people have lost faith in. I don't think anybody ever liked the IRS. It's always been income tax came in early 1900s and it's supposed to be temporary, as I recall, but no, it's not anymore. But so the people that do this with you, have they seen improvements as well?
Yeah, one of the guys, he's already lost a bunch of weight. I think he's been doing it for a few months. The other guy, his situation's far more complicated. I don't even aspire to hope to understand his situation because he's type 1 diabetic. He seems to be forced to eat processed sugar during some moments, which when I see him do that, it confuses me, makes me think that's not carnivore. But I understand type 1 diabetics have to manage their metabolism. It's complicated, so I'm not judging.
Yeah. My guess is probably during a hypoglycemic period, that sometimes can be very devastating if you don't get some sort of rapid return of blood glucose. And some people will take a dextrose tablet or something like that, or glucose tablet to bring that back up, or whatever they can get. Sometimes they're voraciously hungry. You said you've done a few experiments over the years with different things, and it always re-triggers your issues. Can you describe some of those, what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve with those experiments?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's really valuable about carnivore is that if you do strict carnivore and then reintroduce something, you'll feel very quickly how you respond to it in a way that you can't if you're eating all kinds of stuff. It just masks your bodily signals, right? By doing an elimination and then reintroducing something, I could really get in touch with how it affects me. So I love avocado and I love olives and I like pickles. So those are three things that I've done experiments with. And so pickles, I could have pickles one day, no problem. If I have pickles 2 days, I start to get a little bit of gas or discomfort digestively. 3 days, and my IBS is basically on its way to coming back. Avocado, I could have avocado for like 6 or 7 days in a row before I start to notice what it's doing wrong to me. Olives, how many days it takes before I notice. But basically, I've tried to reintroduce some of my favorite foods, and what I can tell is I can have them up to a point, but after that point, it's downhill. So for the most part, I'm not reintroducing things, but yeah.
So you said you went on a ketogenic diet, basically meat and vegetables, lost 20, 30 pounds. Now, carnivores allowed you to lose an additional 70 plus pounds. Had you ever lost weight prior to that with like caloric restriction or eating low fat diets or anything? Had you ever successfully lost weight in other methods?
Yeah, not much, not as much as I lost on keto. Keto, I lost like 20 pounds over a year. And with calorie restriction, I could lose like 10 pounds or so, but then it'll come back with a vengeance. I'll gain 20 pounds and then it was a negative benefit. So
Dieting. When you lost weight with calorie restriction, did you notice any of your symptoms getting better? The depression, the IBS, or any of those things?
I don't I don't remember because it was so long ago and I wasn't looking out for that. I didn't think that food had that close a relationship with how I'm feeling at that time.
Yeah, yeah, certainly it does seem to have a big role in that. I think you'd mentioned some joint pain. Could you go into that a little bit? What were you struggling with regard to joint pain?
I was doing martial arts in elementary, junior high, and high school, and then in I don't know, I twisted my leg or something at one point, and then from that point on, my left knee would always bother me when I was doing martial arts. And I think it was my senior year of high school that I stopped going to martial arts. And then in my 20s, I was doing tennis and I developed tennis elbow. And also during my 20s, and I think again in my 30s, my doctors pressured me to take statins, which gave me muscle problems, muscle discomfort. And it was always inflaming, but just making the joint pain worse, basically. That's what I was referring to.
Okay. And those things have improved. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say it's 95% improved. I probably could start exercising. I haven't made time for it, but I do recognize I should be doing it and aspire to start doing it, or maybe going back to some kind of activity like martial arts.
Yeah. Okay. And as far as your diet today, what does it look like? Because dairy products, eggs, seafood, what are you eating typically?
So the majority is beef. I order cow shares from a somewhat local farm. I'm in the city, so there's not really a local farm. I order a quarter or half cow shares from a farm in upstate New York. And I also get steaks and ground beef from supermarkets when there's sales. So primarily beef. I do have fish or other seafood just for a change of pace. Not that I prefer beef, but I just do appreciate to have different things. So salmon and shrimp and stuff like that, I'll have a couple times, 2, 3, 4 times a month probably. And say if you average it out, I probably eat one steak a day. And so you were asking about eggs and dairy. To me, I go through periods where I eat a lot of eggs and then I get tired of them and I stop eating them for a couple months and then I get back into it. Basically, I probably eat like maybe every quarter, I eat maybe 36 eggs in a quarter. And it's all in one short period of time, like 3 weeks. And then I'm tired of it. And next quarter, I'll buy eggs again. When it comes to dairy, and eggs don't give me any problem as far as I could tell. But when I have my son's friend lives upstate and he has chickens and sometimes he'll bring us the, pasture-raised eggs that have the orange colored yolks instead of the yellow yolks. And I do feel better when I eat those than the regular eggs at the supermarket. So when it comes to dairy, dairy it'll make my dandruff come back. It'll make my skin flaky on my forearms and my legs, but it doesn't make my IBS come back. Cheese, I love cheese, but the fact is it makes me gain weight. So pretty much any dairy I have is a treat. It's not ideal.
Yeah. Okay. And as far as your sort of experience with this, have you had any negatives from carnivore diet? Because some people report some sort of negative gut issue or so. Any negatives up to this point?
Yes, there's one really negative thing. The floss pick budget has increased by 10,000%.
You get meat stuck in your teeth. Yeah, I've experienced that myself occasionally. Yeah, there's one downside. You might have to invest in some toothpicks occasionally or something along those lines. What about, obviously you're going to kill yourself with heart disease. That's right. That's a given is what we're told. What are your thoughts around that? Because maybe your risk goes up, maybe it doesn't. Don't know for sure. How do you deal with that particular issue?
I'm confident that it's not an issue, but hypothetically, if it really is an issue, then I would say quality of life matters more than quantity of life.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. I think a lot. And would you rate your quality of life right now compared to other parts of your life? Where would you put yourself right now with your quality of life?
As medically, I feel healthier than I did when I was 5 years old. Better, but I feel better now than I ever could remember feeling ever in my life.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's a pretty powerful testimonial there. That's the best you've ever felt in your life. A lot of people will notice that. Has it allowed you to do, are there other things you do in your life to help with your overall health? Is it just diet, or do you anything else that other people would consider healthful habits?
I don't drink tap water unless it's an emergency. I distill my own water and then remineralize it with trace mineral solution. I'd say that's probably the only other nutritional thing that I do for health. It's not nutritional, it's hydration, right? Hydration without poisons. But the other thing would be I gained more respect for the sun. I try to get more sun, I haven't worn sunscreen for years now, for maybe 3 or 4 years. I've stopped trying to avoid the sun. And also, I take vitamin D3 during the winter to hopefully make sure that I'm not deficient in D.
All right. That seems to be some decent strategies there. Have you noticed any differences in any other sort of, I don't know, trivial things? I know for me, like I just don't hiccup anymore, which I thought was just weird. I just never get the hiccups anymore. Any unusual sort of observations or things that you've noticed?
Yeah, I used to need distance glasses for driving when I'm driving someplace that I haven't been to a million times. And now I really only need it during the nighttime. Like during the daytime, it seems like I just don't need it. And it's not a strong prescription. Even when I was a kid, through basically the first four decades of my life, I had glasses for seeing in distance, and now the only time I'll use it really would be at nighttime.
Okay, so vision has improved, which I've heard other people mention that they felt that their vision has gotten. They've actually had objective improvements in their visual prescription. They've either gotten off their glasses or their glass prescription has gotten less powerful or needed less powerful. So that's pretty interesting. Have you had much pushback? I don't know, family members, friends saying, "Hey, this is bad for you." How often does that happen, or if at all?
So in the first couple of years that I was doing carnivore, family told me I'm crazy, I'm going to kill myself, I'm missing out on all kinds of vitamins and minerals, I'm going to have deficiencies, my health is going to catastrophically collapse very soon. And over time, they just saw me get healthier instead of sicker. So they stopped saying those things. But
Yeah, so
they haven't decided to carnivore themselves.
yeah. Have you, like you said, you first became aware of this 2017 through my appearance on Rogan, as a lot of people have. First time they'd heard of something like this. But have you seen a greater deal of acceptance just in the general? I think there's more people that are familiar with it now, and more. There's still a lot of skeptics, of course, but there's still a lot of people that are more accepting. Do you seem to find more and more people willing to do this in day to day?
Well, yeah. First, at my work, there's two people doing carnivore, and I've never really spoken to anyone who was doing carnivore before that. that I actually encounter in real life on social media. I'm in most of the Facebook carnivore groups, so I have seen the people talk about it there. And what I've noticed is these groups are rapidly increasing in size. So as far as carnivore becoming more well-known, I think it's pretty obvious if the size of the groups are increasing, it must be becoming more well-known.
Did you, the two people that are doing it work, do you think they did it because they saw you, or did they start on their own independent of you doing it?
No, it was shortly after I was hired that I found out that they had started doing it like a month before or something like that.
Okay, so you had nothing to do with them doing it. They were just happened to be doing it already on their own. So interesting. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I see a lot. I see a lot of people that do this now that never heard of me or anything like that, and so I think it's encouraging that it is spreading throughout the masses in many ways. And let's see. Have you said, other than the toothpicks, no real negatives so far? A lot of people say it's unsustainable. How long have you been doing it now for?
Since March of 2021. So
okay, so
I'm certain that it is sustainable, and it's not hard to sustain it. And if you start to think that it's hard to sustain it, just eat a steak and you'll feel better. So,
yeah, I guess that's pretty good advice. Eat a steak, you'll feel better. I think that's a good advice for most situations, actually. What about favorite foods? Do you have a favorite? Are you mostly focusing on fatty steaks, or what do you tend to eat when you do eat meat?
I try to have one steak every day. So it's either a ribeye or a New York strip most of the time. Because I'm ordering cow shares, I get all kinds of random steaks that I sometimes know or don't know how to cook. So have to figure out new things sometimes. But yeah, the ribeye and New York strip are my favorites, and it's my go-to. So it's what it's if I'm going to buy steak at a supermarket, that's what I'm buying.
Yeah, I guess we should touch into that. So you get your meat. Is it grass finished? Is it grain finished? What's your preference? Do you have a thought on that?
So I always thought that I didn't like grass fed because it didn't taste right to me. But it just turns out that's just what the grass fed beef at the supermarket can offer me. This farm that I'm buying from, they are a regenerative farm that does grass fed, and they try not to use hormones and antibiotics and things like that. Somehow, this meat tastes far better to me than anything I've ever bought at a supermarket, which is why I keep coming back to buy from them, which shocked me because I completely expected not to enjoy grass fed at all.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the one thing with grain finishing is consistent in its flavor, taste, and texture, whereas grass finish can be all over the place depending on how it's finished and the breed of cattle and so on and so forth, different things. I've had some very good tasting grass finished beef, but also I've had some that quite honestly was suboptimal in my opinion. But yeah, the grain finish is consistently of a certain flavor that if you like, it's pretty easy to get. We've got a few minutes left. Is there anything else you want to share before we go?
We discussed a little bit about Bitcoin. I feel like there's a huge synergy between carnivore and Bitcoin. And there's, like, for example, the decentralization of control. Bitcoin removes financial control from centralized institutions, and the carnivore diet removes reliance on centralized food guidelines and processed food industries. I think that they both give empowerment through personal responsibility. Bitcoin promotes financial self-sovereignty by encouraging people to manage their own wealth. And similarly, the carnivore diet empowers individuals to take control of their health through like simple, natural eating. They both have like a resistance to manipulation. Bitcoin resists inflation and government interference. And the carnivore diet is basically rejecting the manipulation of the dietary guidelines shaped by like corporate interests and food industry lobbying. Another thing would be independence from traditional systems. Bitcoin operates outside of the traditional banking system, while Carnivore Diet operates outside the conventional dietary system and medical advice. They're both simple and efficient. Bitcoin transactions are direct and they're efficient compared to traditional finance systems. The Carnivore Diet is simplifying nutrition by focusing on just animal foods, eliminating the complexity of calories in, calories out, calorie restriction, and or just any of the considerations that come with processed foods. Also, they have a synergy of challenging the status quo. Both Bitcoin and Carnivore Diet they're challenging long-standing norms, and they question the validity of the modern guidelines for both medicine, nutrition, and finance. Also, it's like globally accessible. Anyone in the world can use Bitcoin, and anyone in the world could eat meat. And they both have enhanced mental clarity and focus. Like lots of Bitcoin advocates will highlight an increased focus on managing their own finances and their own wealth. And similarly, Carnivore Diet is praised for improving mental clarity and cognitive function by reducing inflammation and sugar dependency. Self-reliance, autonomy, freedom from overregulation. There's so many ways that there's synergies between Bitcoin and carnivore.
Yeah, I certainly see the overlap. And yeah, there's people that are trying to merge the two, guys like Texas Slim with the beef initiative and trying to get people to buy beef with Bitcoin and ranchers to accept Bitcoin. So it's interesting to see how that plays out. Jason, thank you very much for sharing your story, and hopefully it'll inspire some other people. And it's great to see. And maybe I'll run into you next year again at the Bitcoin conference, but appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Yep. Thank you.